So the number one thing that surprised me about the NSA is the deep level of incompetence that it permeates the entire organization. So when I used to, wear a little tinfoil hat and think they were reading my thoughts and whatever, man, they couldn't even read a newspaper. They are really surprisingly ineffective at what they do.
So that's actually pretty interesting. So, we have a lot of conspiracy theorists in the world, and they like to basically point to the government as these wizards that they literally know everything about you and they know how to control that information. But from what I've actually, came across is that a lot of people, not only in the NSA, but also the Secret Service, people that we look up towards, having control over the government, they pretty much don't know what they're doing or they're lacking at doing a good job, right?
Well, to be fair, I can only speak for the National Security
Hmm.
Agency. And the biggest thing that people need to understand is the NSA is externally focused. So
Okay.
we're talking about spying on other countries, making sure that we know what's going on with adversaries, with the bad guys. And that includes a lot of defense, making sure that the bad guys, when they're trying to spy on us, they're not
Right.
getting into our networks, they're not destroying our infrastructure, that kind of thing. And it wouldn't be fair to say they're completely incompetent at it. It's just a much higher level than I was expecting. Uh,
Hmm.
I can't think of. There are definitely pockets of the agency that are doing the kind of stuff you see in movies, but those
Right.
pockets are so tiny. I don't think I ever actually ran across any of them in 16 years.
Wow. Okay. So let's basically take it from the top. What were you actually doing in the NSA? What was your role?
Well, so just like any company, you have computers and you have computer support, and you need people to run those. You need to make sure the connections are working smoothly, that the
Hmm.
tools are doing what they're supposed to do, and that sort of thing. So that was primarily what I did in various different roles.
Okay.
For example, I spent some time as a technical security person, which means I read a lot of documentation, made sure that
Mm.
they met the standards they were supposed to on this system, these computers, they were updated properly, that kind of thing. So,
Right.
really boring, all things considered. The most interesting thing I did was called operations security, where we taught military and companies and government agencies how to control their unclassified information so they didn't give
Hmm.
away information they weren't supposed to. That's the most useful thing I learned that I can share with other people. For instance, an example of that would be when you put the big TV in your house and then you go put the box on the curb and
Yeah.
it's like a giant advertisement that says, I have this nice TV. You don't want to do that, right?
Right.
But people don't think about that. They don't think about how much they advertise and broadcast their information, which can draw
Mm.
risk. So to me, that was the most useful thing I did there. That was not what I spent most of my time doing.
Right.
Most of my time I spent, like if your boat was sinking and you were like spooning it out with like the water a little bit at a time, teaspoon at a time.
Yeah.
That's kind of how most of my career there felt.
So would you say that a lot of their systems are kind of outdated? Is that what is that like a little bit of what causes like an incompetence?
I would say the incompetence is the same as any job you've worked.
Right.
You have arrogant and tone deaf executives, you have
Hmm.
managers who are bullies and fools, and there's no accountability anywhere. The whole system
Hmm.
is based on protecting people above and punching people down. It's an extremely toxic environment. And in a toxic environment where people are more concerned about their
Right.
image than things like efficiency, money, and synergy go out the window. And that's what I wrote my book about. Less the expose of the NSA than this is the wrong way to run a business.
Hmm.
And all of these lessons will apply to other organizations as well, which I know now because I've seen it everywhere I've worked since I've left the agency. I mean, you read the stories online of
Hmm.
one of my favorites is on Reddit. They have this malicious compliance subreddit where
Hmm.
the people who actually know what they're doing are shut down by arrogant and foolish managers who run right over them. They say, okay, I'll just step back and let you make the mistakes. And it costs them customers, it costs them massive amounts of money. Maybe they end up in court because they
Right.
weren't listening. They weren't paying attention to the people who knew what they were doing. And that is the one critical failure that I saw in the 16 years that I was there. You have literal world experts, and they're not listening to them at all.
Yeah. So during your time in the NSA, did you ever feel like you were doing something that was wrong that made you
Oh,
feel like
sure.
like sick?
So there were at least a few. I mean, for the most part, you're supposed to report fraud, waste, abuse, and
Mm.
mismanagement. And I did. In one case, there was a situation where the NSA was making up numbers to Congress, and I reported it, and they blew me off. So there really wasn't anything else I could do. I guarantee you that's not worth going Snowden over. I'm not going to go to the reporters and ruin my life over something as minor as that. But
Yeah.
I did write about it in my book. So when people read that book, then, well, it'll get to the court of public opinion. And hopefully, maybe somebody in Congress will notice and take issue with it and hold them accountable for it.